Hello everyone, here we are. We're going to read 1 Samuel 13, and guess what? I was typing in how many books in Samuel. I saw that later and I was like, what are you doing? You're trying to find out how many chapters. So there's 31 chapters in 1 Samuel. So by the time we finish tonight, we'll be about halfway through. So let's get going here and let's make sure we can see Mr. Ollie. Ollie is right there. Okay, so here we go. 1 Samuel 13. Now this is interesting. I just want to set it up by saying that Jonathan is Saul's son, and he was a great military leader. Okay, but in this chapter he attacks a Philistine outpost. Basically the message he's sending is, look, we've been subjugated by you Philistines for long enough, and you know, even though we've enjoyed peace, we're still subjugated, so we're telling you we won't do this anymore. Saul was 30 years old when he became king, and he reigned over Israel 42 years, so till he was 72. Jonathan attacked the Philistines' outpost at Geba, G-E-B-A, and the Philistines heard about it. Then Saul had the trumpet blown throughout the land and said, let the Hebrews hear. So all Israel heard the news. Saul has attacked the Philistine outpost, because whatever Jonathan does, it's in the name of Saul. And now Israel has become obnoxious to the Philistines, and the people were summoned to join Saul at Gilgal. The Philistines assembled to fight Israel with 3,000 chariots, 6,000 charioteers, and soldiers as numerous as the sand on the seashore. They went up and camped at Michmash, east of Beth Aven. When the Israelites saw that their situation was critical and that their army was hard-pressed, they hid in caves and thickets among the rocks and in pits and cisterns. Some Hebrews even crossed the Jordan to the land of Gad and Gilead. Saul remained at Gilgal, and all the troops with him were quaking with fear. He waited 7 days, the time set by Samuel. But Samuel didn't come to Gilgal, and Saul's men began to scatter. Okay, now listen carefully. So he said, bring me the burnt offering and the fellowship offerings. Isn't that nice that we recognize these different offerings? And Saul offered up the burnt offering. Just as he finished making the offering, Samuel arrived, and Saul went out to greet him. Okay, kings aren't priests. The priests make the offering. So Saul really sinned here by jumping the gun and saying, oh, I guess Samuel's not coming and my men are scattered and they're scared, so I'm going to quickly offer the burnt offering. Bad move, okay? Waiting is part of being a person of God, okay? We wait. When the Lord says wait, we wait. I've been waiting for over 30 years for a myriad of things. Number one, that my daughter would come to Christ. I've been waiting easily 35 years, okay? We wait and we learn how to do it, okay? And if the Lord had told me, you wait another 40 years, then I'm not to move before that 40 years is up, okay? We just don't. We learn the hard way, trust me. All right, so Samuel came and Saul went out to greet him. What have you done? Asked Samuel. Saul replied, when I saw the men were scattering and that you didn't come at the set time and that the Philistines were assembling at Michmash, I thought, now the Philistines will come down against me at Gilgal. And I haven't sought the Lord's favor, so I felt compelled to offer the burnt offering. So he sinned because he jumped the gun, he reacted, and he operated out of fear, okay? You have done a foolish thing, Samuel said. You have not kept the command of the Lord your God gave you. If you had, he would have established your kingdom over Israel for all time. But now your kingdom will not endure. The Lord has sought out a man after his own heart and appointed him ruler of his people because you haven't kept the Lord's command. Sometimes the smallest misstep can bring big results, okay? Then Samuel left Gilgal and went up to Gibeah and Benjamin, and Saul counted the men who were with him. They numbered about 600. Saul and his son Jonathan and the men with them were staying in Gibeah in Benjamin, while the Philistines camped at Michmash. Raiding parties went out from the Philistine camp in 3 detachments. One turned towards Ophrah, so there's an extra H in there, otherwise it would be Oprah. Ophrah in the vicinity of Shual, which is S-H-U-A-L, another towards Beth Horon, and the third towards the borderland overlooking the valley of Zeboim facing the wilderness. Not a blacksmith could be found in the whole land of Israel, because the Philistines had said, otherwise the Hebrews will make swords or spears. So all Israel, so they kept them from having that ability to do that. Philistines didn't want them rising up against them, because remember, they're occupied by the Philistines, all right? So even though they have a king over them, they're occupied, okay? They're subjected to or subjugated by the Philistines. And this was Jonathan's whole point, is we don't like this. We don't care if we're living in peace. We're still humiliated being subjugated to you Philistines. So he attacked that outpost in Geba. All right, and so this is what's happening now. So the Philistines said, we aren't going to give them any blacksmith shops, or they'll make swords and spears. So all Israel went down to the Philistines to have their plow points, mattocks, that's a farm tool, axes, and sickles sharpened. The price was 2/3 of a shekel for sharpening plow points and mattocks, and 1/3 of a shekel for sharpening forks and axes, and for repointing goads. So if they were going to sharpen their farm tools, they had to go to the Philistines and pay to have it done, so that they could plow their land and keep their crops, etc., etc. Okay, but they didn't have their own blacksmiths so that they could start making weapons. Okay. So on the day of the battle, not a soldier with Saul and Jonathan had a sword or a spear in his hand. Only Saul and his son Jonathan had them. Now a detachment of Philistines had gone out to the pass at Michmash. I actually knew a woman whose last name was Michmash, and at the time I thought, what a strange name. Now we know. And her first name was Mora, which is also a Jewish name I think. Well, I know Mara is what Naomi said, meaning, the Lord, remember when she lost her husband and her sons, she said, oh, don't call me Naomi anymore, call me Mara, which was M-A-R-A. I'm sure Mora means something different. Mora was spelled M-A-U-R-A, and her last name was Michmash, which is M-I-K-M-A-S-H. Okay, so chapter 14. One day Jonathan, son of Saul, said to his young armor bearer, come, let's go over to the Philistine outpost on the other side. But he didn't tell his father, Saul. Saul was staying on the outskirts of Gibeah under a pomegranate tree in Migron, M-I-G-R-O-N. With him were about 600 men, among whom was Ahijah, A-H-I-J-A-H, who was wearing an ephod. Remember, the ephod is the square little, sometimes it's made out of gold, sometimes in Samuel's case when he was little, it was made out of linen. It's a little breastplate. Ahijah was wearing an ephod. He was a son of Ichabod's brother Ahitub, son of Phinehas, the son of Eli. Okay, so now we're moving into priests. We recognize the name Eli for sure. And Phinehas was Eli's son, one of the sons that was put to death. Okay, so I'm going to read that again. Among whom was Ahishah, who was wearing an ephod. He was the son of Ichabod's brother Ahitub, son of Phinehas, the son of Eli, the Lord's priest in Shiloh. No one was aware that Jonathan had left. On each side of the pass that Jonathan intended to cross to reach the Philistine outpost was a cliff. One was called Bozez, spelled just like it sounds, and the other Seneh, S-E-N-E-H. One cliff stood to the north near Michmash, the other to the south towards Geba. Jonathan said to his young armor bearer, come, let's go over to the outpost of those uncircumcised men. Perhaps the Lord will act in our behalf. Nothing can hinder the Lord from saving, whether by many or by few. He's going to take a big dare here, okay? When he's speaking of uncircumcised men, he's speaking of non-Jewish men or the Philistines. Do all that you have in mind, his armor bearer said. Go ahead, I'm with you heart and soul. Jonathan said, for some reason that reminded me of myself and my boss, because, we make these forays into capturing these homes to list, etc. And I don't know, it just reminded me, it was just a funny thought. Jonathan said, come on then, we'll cross over towards them and let them see us. Excuse me. If they say to us, wait there until we come to you, we'll stay where we are and not go up to them. But if they say, come up to us, we'll climb up, because that'll be our sign that the Lord has given them into our hands. Man, this guy is a daredevil. He's very brave. So both of them showed themselves to the Philistine outpost. Look, said the Philistines, the Hebrews are crawling out of the holes they were hiding in. The men of I'm sorry, I'm laughing. This is terrible. The men of the outpost shouted to Jonathan and his armor bearer, come up to us. We'll teach you a lesson. So Jonathan said to his armor bearer, climb up after me. The Lord has given them into the hand of Israel. Jonathan climbed up using his hands and feet with his armor bearer right behind him. The Philistines fell before Jonathan, and his armor bearer followed and killed behind him. In that first attack, Jonathan and his armor bearer killed some 20 men in an area of about a half an acre. So these guys are he-men. These are like the kind of, almost like, people we see on TV. Excuse me. I'm thinking, Arnold Schwarzenegger or something. Then panic struck the whole army, those in the camp and field and those in the outposts and raiding parties, the Philistine armies. And the ground shook. It was a panic sent by God. Saul's lookouts at Gibeah and Benjamin saw the army melting away in all directions. Then Saul said to the men who were with him, muster the forces and see who has left us. When they did, it was Jonathan and his armor bearer who were not there. Excuse me, sinuses, of course. And the weather's been so crazy here, snowing and sun. And today, walking out the front door, it was like stepping into a glass of ice water with ice cubes in it. It was exactly that feeling. And so it's very dry, like we're under fire warnings right now because it's very dry. There's no humidity and it's very cold. All right. So they saw that Saul was not there, that Jonathan and his armor bearer were not there with them. Saul said to Ahijah, bring the ark of God. At that time, it was with the Israelites. While Saul was talking to the priest, the tumult in the Philistine camp increased more and more. So Saul said to the priest, withdraw your hand. Then Saul and all his men assembled and went to the battle. They found the Philistines in total confusion, striking each other with their swords. Do you remember we heard this? We saw this happen when Gideon went to attack the army that was as big as the sands of the sea, and God sent them into confusion and they killed themselves off in front of Gideon and Gideon's army, and that's what's happening here. Those Hebrews who had previously been with the Philistines and had gone up with them to their camp went over to the Israelites who were with Saul and Jonathan. When all the Israelites who had hidden in the hill country of Ephraim heard that the Philistines were on the run, they joined the battle in hot pursuit. Some of us get brave, I guess, when we see the enemy losing. So on that day, the Lord saved Israel, and the battle moved on beyond Beth Aven. Now, when it says here, those Hebrews who had previously been with the Philistines and had gone up with them to their camp and went over to the Israelites. So for whatever reason, there were Israelites in the Philistine camp. Perhaps they were slaves, servants, just there for a day trade, who knows? Okay, but they joined Israel when Israel came. Now, the Israelites were in distress that day because Saul had bound the people under an oath, saying, cursed be anyone who eats food before evening comes, before I've avenged myself on my enemies. So none of the troops tasted food. The entire army entered the woods, and there was honey on the ground. When they went into the woods, they saw the honey oozing out, yet no one put his hand to his mouth because they feared the oath. But Jonathan hadn't heard that his father had bound the people with the oath, so he reached out the end of the staff that was in his hand and dipped it into the honeycomb. He raised his hand to his mouth, and his eyes brightened. Then one of the soldiers told him, your father bound the army under a strict oath, saying, cursed be anyone who eats food today. That's why the men are faint. Jonathan said, my father's made trouble for the country. See how my eyes brightened when I tasted a little of this honey? How much better it would have been if the men had eaten today some of the plunder they took from their enemies. Would not the slaughter of the Philistines have been even greater? That day, after the Israelites had struck down the Philistines from Michmash to Aijalon, they were exhausted. they pounced on the plunder, and taking sheep, cattle, and calves, they butchered them on the ground and ate them together with the blood. Uh-oh, they're not supposed to be eating it with the blood. Then someone said to Saul, "Look, the men are sinning against the Lord by eating meat that has blood in it." "You have broken faith," he said. "Roll a large stone over here at once." Then he said, "Go out among the men and tell them, each of you bring me your cattle and sheep. Slaughter them here and eat them. Don't sin against the Lord by eating meat with blood still in it." So everyone brought his ox that night and slaughtered it there. Excuse me. Then Saul built an altar to the Lord. It was the first time he had done this. Saul said, "Let us go down and pursue the Philistines by night and plunder them till dawn, and let us not leave one of them alive." "Do whatever seems best to you," they replied. But the priest said, "Let us inquire of God here." So Saul asked God, "Shall I go down and pursue the Philistines? Will you give them into Israel's hands?" But God didn't answer him that day. Saul therefore said, "Come here, all you who are leaders of the army, and let us find... Come here, all of you who are leaders of the army, and let us find out what sin has been committed today. As surely as the Lord who rescues Israel lives, even if the guilt lies with my son Jonathan, he must die." Uh-oh, remember Jonathan ate the honey. But not one of them said a word. They must have loved Jonathan. Saul then said to all the Israelites, "You stand over there. I and Jonathan, my son, will stand over here." "Do what seems best to you," they replied. Then Saul prayed to the Lord, the God of Israel, "Why have you not answered your servant today? If the fault is in me or my son Jonathan, respond with the Urim." Remember the Urim and the Turim? The black stone, the white stone? "But if the men of Israel are at fault, respond with the Turim. So if it's me and my son Jonathan, respond with the Urim. If it's somebody in the army that I've put together here, the Israelite army, respond with the Turim. So one's white, one's black. I don't know which one is which." Jonathan and Saul were taken by lot, and the men were cleared. Saul said, "Cast the lot between me and Jonathan, my son." And Jonathan was taken. Uh-oh. Then Saul said to Jonathan, "Tell me what you've done." So Jonathan told him, "I tasted a little honey with the end of my staff, and now I must die." Saul said, "May God deal with me, be it ever so severely, if you do not die, Jonathan." But the men said to Saul, "Should Jonathan die, he who has brought out about this great deliverance in Israel? Never! As surely as the Lord lives, not a hair of his head will fall to the ground, for he did this today with God's help." So the men rescued Jonathan, and he was not put to death. See, I think they loved him. Then Saul stopped pursuing the Philistines, and they withdrew to their own land. After Saul had assumed rule over Israel, he fought against their enemies on every side: Moab, the Ammonites, Edom, Edom, which was Esau, remember? The kings of Zobah, and the Philistines. Wherever he turned, he inflicted punishment on them. He fought valiantly and defeated the Amalekites, delivering Israel from the hands of those who had plundered them. So he's just liberated Israel. But do you remember that Samuel said to him, "God's given your kingdom into another's hands, a man after my own heart." And guess who that's going to be? I'm not going to say a word. Saul's sons were Jonathan, Ishvi, and Malchishua. The name of his older daughter was Merab, and that of the younger was Michal, or Michal, M-I-C-H-A-L. His wife's name was Abinoam, daughter of Ahimaaz. The name of the commander of Saul's army was Abner, A-B-N-E-R, son of Ner, and Ner was Saul's uncle. Saul's father Kish and Abner's father Ner were sons of Abiel. All the days of Saul, there was bitter war with the Philistines, and whenever Saul saw a mighty or brave man, he took him into his service. Okay, so when you see someone named Abner, he is named after the commander of Saul's army. I didn't realize that Abner was a Jewish name. So, shall we go on? Let's try. Let's see how long this chapter is. No, this is very short. Oh, well, okay. 15. Samuel said to Saul, "I'm the one the Lord sent to anoint you king over his people in Israel. So listen now to the message from the Lord. This is what the Lord Almighty says. I will punish the Amalekites for what they did to Israel when they waylaid them as they came up from Egypt. Now remember, Amalek is the spirit of Amalek is still spoken of by the Jewish people, by Israel today. As oh, that's an antichrist spirit. That's a spirit of what is it when somebody does not believe in any God at all? Atheism. Spirit of the spirit of Amalek is used to cover a lot of things that are antichrist, okay? I will punish the Amalekites for what they did to Israel when they waylaid them as they came up from Egypt. And if you remember, they were cutting off the penises of the old and the infirm and the young that couldn't fight back and throwing them up into the air to mock the circumcision in front of God's face. Now go attack the Amalekites and totally destroy all that belongs to them. Don't spare them. Put to death men and women, children, infants, cattle, sheep, camels, and donkeys. Ouch. Payback is horrible, isn't it? So Saul summoned the men and mustered them at Telaim, 200,000 foot soldiers and 10,000 from Judah. Saul went to the city of Amalek and set an ambush in the ravine. Then he said to the Kenites, go away, leave the Amalekites so that I don't destroy you along with them. For you showed kindness to all the Israelites when they came up out of Egypt. So the Kenites moved away from the Amalekites. Then Saul attacked the Amalekites all the way from Havilah to Shur, S-H-U-R, near the eastern border of Egypt. He took Agag, king of the Amalekites, alive, and all his people he totally destroyed with the sword. But Saul and the army spared Agag, and the best of the sheep and cattle, the fat calves and lambs, everything that was good. These they were unwilling to destroy completely, but everything that was despised and weak they totally destroyed. Uh-oh. The Lord told him to destroy everything. And it says here, they only despised what they didn't, they only killed what they didn't want, what was weak, despised and weak. So anything they didn't want, basically. Then the word of the Lord came to Samuel. I regret that I've made Saul king. Okay, hold on. I just hit my computer and lost my place. I regret that I've made Saul king because he's turned away from me and has not carried out my instructions. Samuel was angry and he cried out to the Lord all that night. Early in the morning, Samuel got up and went to meet Saul, but he was told, Saul's gone to Carmel. There he has set up a monument in his own honor and has turned and gone on down to Gilgal. We're going to hear more about people who create monuments honoring themselves, okay? Not a good thing. When Samuel reached him, Saul said, the Lord bless you. I've carried out the Lord's instructions. No, he hasn't. He's lying. But Samuel said, what then is this bleating of sheep in my ears? What's this lowing of cattle that I hear? Saul answered, the soldiers brought them from the Amalekites. They spared the best of the sheep and cattle to sacrifice to the Lord your God, but we totally destroyed the rest. Enough, Samuel said to Saul. Let me tell you what the Lord said to me last night. Tell me, Saul replied. Samuel said, although you were once small in your own eyes, did you not become the head of the tribes of Israel? The Lord anointed you king over Israel, and he sent you on a mission, saying, go and completely destroy those wicked people, the Amalekites, wage war against them until you've wiped them out. Why did you not obey the Lord? Why did you pounce on the plunder and do evil in the eyes of the Lord? But I did obey the Lord, Saul said. I went on the mission the Lord assigned me. I completely destroyed the Amalekites and brought back Agag, their king. The soldiers took sheep and cattle from the plunder, the best of what was devoted to God, in order to sacrifice them to the Lord your God at Gilgal. Isn't it interesting? He's sort of like he's going, the Lord your God. But Samuel replied, does the Lord delight in burnt offerings and sacrifices as much as in obeying the Lord? That's a very important precept, people. To obey is better than sacrifice. I've had occasion to tell my children that, okay? Obedience is better than sacrifice. Matter of fact, I'm going to stop here and tell you very quickly. One time I thought that I would get off my head meds. I take a very low dose of a head med to battle my depression. And one time I thought, I'm done with this, I'll stop it. Well, I stopped it for about 6 weeks, and I got very, very, it was just bad. I don't know how to explain it, but I went into a depression that was worse than anything I'd ever felt in this life. And one morning I woke up in the fetal position on the floor. And I heard the Lord speak into my heart, I desire mercy before sacrifice. So that's another precept right there. It's not exactly obedience, but I got right up and walked to the emergency department of the hospital and got back on my meds, and I've never done anything that foolish since. Nobody likes to have to take insulin. No one likes to take head meds, but if you have to take them, it's not a sin. The Lord has empowered the medical industry to make these things. 100 years ago, people just became alcoholics to deal with their mental illnesses, or they killed themselves, okay? And now we don't have to do that. We have medicines that will put serotonin in the brain to help the brain function so that the person is not always on a depression, a low. Okay, so that was a scary experience, but when I started the story, I thought it was going to tie into obedience is better than sacrifice, but you know, mercy also is, or what the Lord said to me was, I desire mercy and not sacrifice. In other words, stop sacrificing your meds, be merciful to yourself. You know, be merciful. Go get your meds. You need them. And man, I got that message loud and clear. Now, as far as obedience being better than sacrifice, I'll tell you quickly. I read a newspaper article once, and this scripture just came right up to me. A young girl, I read this years and years and years ago. A young girl snuck out of her bedroom and went off with her friends. And they attacked her in the night out they had, and they murdered her violently, threw her in the trunk of the car, and I believe burned the trunk, you know, burned her body. And I just thought, oh my God, because when they delved into the story, you know, the parents were like, we had her grounded, we wanted her to stay home. And so that was like a very ugly picture of obedience is better than any kind of sacrifice you can offer to the Lord, saying, you know, here, take this from me. You know, this proves I'm good. No, your obedience is going to prove that you're honoring the Lord, rather than, here, I'm honoring you with this, you know, whatever it is you're offering to the Lord. No, your obedience says more about how you feel about the Lord than anything. Okay, so let's get back to it. So he's saying, I did obey the Lord. We took these fine sheep and cattle to sacrifice to the Lord your God at Gilgal. But Samuel replied, does the Lord delight in burnt offerings and sacrifices as much as in obeying the Lord? To obey is better than sacrifice, and to heed, to listen, is better than the fat of rams. For rebellion is like the sin of divination. In other words, like witchcraft. And arrogance like the evil of idolatry. Because you've rejected the word of the Lord, he's rejected you as king. Then Saul said to Samuel, I've sinned. I violated the Lord's command and your instructions. I was afraid of the men, and so I gave in to them. See how he keeps blaming the men? Now I beg you, forgive my sin and come back with me so that I may worship the Lord. Even if he was afraid, you know, just own it. Don't add anyone into your guilt. But Samuel said to him, I won't go back with you. You've rejected the word of the Lord, and the Lord has rejected you as king over Israel. As Samuel turned to leave, Saul caught hold of the hem of his robe, and it tore. Samuel said to him, the Lord has torn the kingdom of Israel from you today and has given it to one of your neighbors, to one better than you. He who is the glory of Israel doesn't lie or change his mind, for he's not a human being that he should change his mind. Saul replied, I've sinned, but please honor me before the elders of my people and before Israel. In other words, you know, make sure my name is still good. Come back with me so that I may worship the Lord your God. So Samuel went back with Saul, and Saul worshiped the Lord. Then Samuel said, bring me Agag, king of the Amalekites. Agag came to him in chains, and he thought, surely the bitterness of death is past. But Samuel said, as your sword has made women childless, so will your mother be childless among women. And Samuel put Agag to death before the Lord at Gilgal. This is payback, people. Then Samuel left for Ramah, but Saul went up to his home in Gibeah of Saul. Then Samuel left for Ramah, but Saul went up to... You know, I just want to say this. I mean, here they are going after the Amalekites, the most vicious and vile creeps against the Lord, who've harmed the Israelites. And Saul doesn't follow the Lord's command to a T to get rid of these people. God obviously wanted them off the planet. And Saul leaves them. You know, he leaves the king. I mean, the guy didn't get to be king because he wasn't sharp, okay, or strong in some way. And, you know, Samuel just calls him and says, you know, your sword has made women childless. In other words, you've killed a lot of men. And now it's going to happen. Now your mother's going to be childless. Okay, so Samuel is honoring what the Lord said and not leaving any of the Amalekites around. And that was kind of amazing to me that he left Agag alive. Saul did. So Samuel remedied that. Then Samuel left for Ramah, but Saul went up to his home in Gibeah of Saul. Until the day Samuel died, he didn't go to see Saul again, though Samuel mourned for him. And the Lord regretted that he'd made Saul king over Israel. And that's the end. I love you very much. Pull out of that whatever you can. And tomorrow I'll see you for 1 Samuel 16, and we'll take it from there. And we're going to hear about who God has chosen to be the next king of Israel. And it's going to surprise you who it is. Love you. Bye-bye.